Hello everyone on the YouTubes. How are you doing today? I hope well. It's going to be a bit of a weird one. What the fuck is with my camera? Why will it not stop focusing? One sec. I've got to fix that. Very strange. Well, there's Violet. Hello, Violet. Why is this doing this? You got a flower.
It's a Hello Kitty one.
Well, thank you for the Hello Kitty flower.
You're in Discord. Your sound is a little crunchy. I don't know how it sounds to other people or on YouTube, but to me it sounds a little crunchy.
I'll check YouTube. YouTube will tell me. They always yell at me. How terrible is the audio? Is it sounding bad? Is it still bad, August? Okay, no.
It could be an internet issue on my end, but yeah, it's just a little bit like there's a little bit of buzz or something. Not like of your voice, like not like an unplugged thing, but like there's a little bit of weird variance in the like. You know what I'm talking about?
No.
Like a little bit of crunchiness? Okay.
No. They were dual Fantas, Pashy. Strawberry Fanta. All right.
Let's try restarting Discord. See if that helps.
Yeah, I'll check my audio settings too. Testing my voice. Well, on my side, it sounds pretty great, actually.
Everyone seems to think it was probably me, so...
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, I'm overgained. Really? Fucking, I have shit turned down a bit. I don't know. Discord's funky right now. It's in Discord that it's funky. I was listening to myself just now on YouTube, and it's sounding fine.
Yeah, it sounds like what happens on Discord when there's like a little bit of lag or internet issues.
Fucking Discord. Fucking Discord. All right. So this week, we're continuing our Klossowski reading of Nietzsche and the Vicious Circle, well, to the Quarantine Collective's reading of said book. Last week, we spent a little bit of time sort of prepping for the main brunt of the experience of the Eternal Return, Klossowski building up to, not far from where we're at, actually. One of the things he's working through Nietzsche to talk about is the nature of what willing is, how willing works, how it operates, how it works for us, within us, and deals with these things. Because there is a weird way that they're talking about willing necessity in the previous paragraphs. Nietzsche speaks about this a lot, and Klossowski's very attached specifically to it. It's the question of how do you will what apparently is happening anyway? How do you will what is happening anyway? How do you will necessity? Now, for Klossowski, willing isn't quite the causation of necessity. You don't will necessity to happen. It's not a causative direct relationship. Instead, it's willing is a transformation of the relation to necessity. We'll be getting through exactly what that means. And if today is a bit of a stilted reading, and you'll see me possibly running off, and you'll see the door here, little people running in and out. I'm on a little bit of dad duty as they're watching a nature show, and they've been a little bit more hyper than average. So you'll have to deal with that, and we'll be making our way through. But the idea for this is to talk through what willing is. And as we do, and as we make our way in today's reading, it's talking about how willing operates, how willing presupposes a subject to will. That when we will think, it's who's willing? Well, I am. I'm a subject who is willing. But the challenge is that the Eternal Return, this breakout, this sort of meta view of the situation dissolves said subject. So if that's the case, and we have this willing, which is, again, the shifting of one's relation to necessity, and we have the eternal return, which is constantly breaking us in and out of this, we're actually talking about a series of transient identities. And these transient identities are not a single substance. They're not a single thing. They're not a consistency themselves. Instead, they are a sort of odd mix of contingent and necessary intertwined inside of things. So, as we make our way into the eternal return and the experience of it, be thinking about, especially in this next paragraph, how willing operates. Because it is not, again, personal subject willing something, but instead the will operating and sort of building that subject. We are in page 59. We're page 59. It'll be on screen in about 2 seconds here, buddy. I just usually do a little solo dance for everyone. And then I click a button and it does this. And then you get to join me. I think I've got it shared already in the Discord, and we'll just make our way through the beginning of this paragraph, which is really where we're talking about, finally, the experience of the eternal return. The last thing I'll say is, as always with this book, this is Klossowski writing through the experience of the experience directly. This is not some abstract third person, and he doesn't read Nietzsche as talking abstractly about some other thing, but instead that Nietzsche is sharing directly his experience and his understanding, and as such, we're reading it through Klossowski, reading it through Nietzsche, reading Nietzsche. Yes, it is that fun. But to read. How can willing intervene without forgetting what must now be re-willed? For in fact, this very moment in which the necessity of the circular movement was revealed to me appears in my life as having never taken place beforehand. The hohe Stimmung, the high tonality of my soul, was required in order for me to know and feel the necessity that all things return. If I meditate on this high tonality in which the circle is suddenly reflected, and if I accept it, no longer as a personal obsession, but as the only valid apprehension of being, as the sole reality, I will see that it is impossible for it to have not already appeared to me innumerable times, perhaps in other forms. But I had forgotten it, because it is inscribed in the very essence of the circular movement, which I necessarily forget from one state to the next, so that I can reach another state, be thrown outside of myself, even at the risk of everything coming to a stop. And even when I will not have forgotten that I had been precipitated outside myself in this life, I nevertheless had forgotten that I was thrown outside myself in another life, one in no way different from this life. God, I love this book. We open with the question. As we've talked about willing at this point, we've talked about forgetting. Nietzsche's big on forgetting. Forgetting is the digestion of the intellect. We forget so new things can come about. We forget for good reason. Like there's a process to it. But we open, how can willing intervene without forgetting what must now be re-willed? It's a paradox that seems to be placed in front of us. There's this aporia of memory and agency that is created by the eternal return. There is an absence. The memory disappears. It's gone. The agency is gone. It's no longer there. For us to re-will the eternal return, the eternal recurrence, requires remembering it, though. It requires remembering it across many iterations, but the doctrine says that every iteration begins with forgetting. As he talked about, we understand, we experience this high tonality, we realize it, and then in the next moment, as the world sort of settles, we've forgotten that we just experienced it, so we may go about our time. The doctrine, as he's talking about it, seems paradoxical. It implies that every return begins in forgetting, but we must re-will it. How can we re-will while forgetting? That's kind of the thing up front. It's the structural paradox that is really at the core of, as Klossowski's identified it, Nietzsche's amour fati, the love of fate. And the whole idea of the will to return, the whole idea of Zarathustra in Nietzsche's writings demands this of us. But if it requires a conscious affirmation and at the same time declared that consciousness, subjectivity, experience doesn't actually continue or persist across these cycles, then it's actually reaching its own limit in the way we're describing it. Right? Does that make it like that? Nietzsche never really says this paradox explicitly. It's very much built into it, and it's one of the things that I've always really liked about Nietzsche's writing is sort of the self-inflicted paradoxes, almost Zen Koan style writing of a lot of his stuff. But how can we maintain identity and continuity when the essence of identity, as Nietzsche and Klossowski are saying here, is the dissolution and reformation of it? This is the question. How can willing intervene without forgetting what must now be re-willed? Nietzsche's got a paradox, and it's kind of a fucking huge problem. Well, Klossowski answers, because in this very moment, for in fact, this very moment in which the necessity of the circular movement was revealed to me, appears in my life as having never taken place beforehand. The ho he Stimmung, high tonality of my soul, was required in order for me to know or feel the necessity that all things return. This revelatory experience that is the eternal return is always absolutely new, appears as absolutely new. I should say appears as, that's more the phrasing he's using. Even though it requires previous occurrences, even though it's set up in that way. The Nietzsche, as he wrote, we went through his writings earlier part of the section, the Silmarie experience, and all of that. This is Klossowski pulling from Nietzsche's actual writings on the experience of the eternal return. And the way Nietzsche talks about it, the term, and I kind of giggle when I say it, is ho he Stimmung. It's, Stimmung is like, tonality is the phrasing, attunement, vibing with, on like an extreme level, like it's tuning fork level, like attachment and all of that. It's like it's getting in this place of this elevated state. But this elevated state, and only in this elevated state, is our subjectivity, our consciousness, able to grasp what exceeds normal time, normal experience. The necessary contingency happening here, as he's talking about it, the high tone of my soul was required in order for me to know and feel the necessity that all things return. That revelatory experience grants, outside of normal time, an experience of knowledge that this happens over and over. He's more or less saying the way that we might talk about, and again, to go back, Nietzsche wrote about his... What's up, buddy? The Koopalings and Bowser Jr. want something to watch more exciting. What's that? Well, you know where the remote is? It's by the sink. You can do that. Sorry. Bowser Jr. and Iggy had a question for me. Anyway, where was I? What was I talking about? Nietzsche and his states. Nietzsche writes extensively about his states kind of throughout all of this. And when he is talking about sort of the depressive or the active or the high tonality or manic, like he's very, very aware of these states, and that these states then sort of drive adoption of particular subjectivities. This is Klossowski spent the beginning of the book sort of going through this. And just as in depressive states, we might experience that time never ends and the next moment never comes, or in manic states that everything is constantly moving at a ridiculous pace, the experience of that state yields an understanding or an experience of time or things that is different. And Hohe Stimmung, this state-dependent high tonality of the soul, is an exceptionally heightened intensity, forgotten in what we might call everyday states of things, right? But that this psychoaffective condition is itself part of the eternal return, but also reveals the eternal return. That the knowledge that this will happen again, the feeling this will happen again, that comes with the state, as sort of he's putting it. Thank you, August. August is copying. August runs I think a couple other Nietzsche groups at this point. But to quote Nietzsche, a philosopher who has traversed many kinds of health and keeps traversing them has passed through an equal number of philosophies. He simply cannot keep from transposing his states every time into the most spiritual form and distance. This art of transfiguration is philosophy. We philosophers are not free to divide body from soul as people do. We are even less free to divide soul from spirit. Such a beautiful gay science aphorism too. Thank you. Thank you. This is the high tonality of the soul reveals its own repeating, that it will return again, even though we know we can't remember having experienced it, but we're aware that it must have, that by necessity it's come about. It's been there. If I meditate on this high tonality in which the circle is suddenly reflected, and if I accept it no longer as personal obsession, but as the only valid apprehension of being, as the sole reality, I will see that it is impossible for it to have not already appeared to me innumerable times, perhaps in other forms. This is not a personal obsession. This is not a personal delusion that one subject is experiencing. Instead, as he says, if I meditate on this, if I accept it, no longer as personal obsession, but as the only valid apprehension of being, as the sole reality, it creates it creates a different shift of a thing. It's that Nietzsche is talking of the eternal return, not really as thought experiment, as existential thing, or really cosmological doctrine. It's really sidestepping both of those. It's saying that this becomes the actual experience of existence. If the return is real, and if it also is infinite, then this thought must have occurred infinitely. The revelation contradicts the content of itself, which is kind of beautiful. It's the revelation in a single moment contradicts the idea that it's a single experience. Yeah, I think that's probably how I'd phrase that. Yeah.
Mr. Brooks, you mean that it is kind of like the spurious infinite of thought, right? Or the spurious infinite of kind of like moving thought or something like that? Could you elaborate on that point, like about the cosmological or infinite, you know?
So some people talk about it, when Nietzsche has been taken apart in a billion different ways by a billion people. And some people take the eternal return as being this idea that the entire universe, like Big Crunch to Big Bang, is repeating, and that the entire cosmos repeats over and over. Others speak of it more as a thought experiment where a demon appears and grants you, hey, you will repeat today forever. What will you do? all of these are, I mean, I'm not going to say they're bad readings. They ain't my jam, but there's a lot of ways to sort of break this apart. But this question that's being placed here, Klossowski specifically is staging this movement from personal obsession to soul reality. And the phrasing around soul reality here is very specific. If I accept it no longer as personal obsession, but as the only valid apprehension of being as a soul reality, I will see that it is impossible for it to not already appeared to me innumerable times, perhaps in other forms. This, if you take the experience you're having as the experience you're having. And again, this is excessively Nietzschean from exactly the thing I was just reading from Gay Science, taking the body, soul, everything as one, stepping aside from all of those dichotomies, any of them. This isn't the world, the soul, the body, everything, the perspectival moment of it. It is the only valid apprehension of being. If I accept this high tonality, this revelatory moment as it is clear that it is not possible for this to have been the first time this happened. And that's, to me, sidestepping the question of whether or not you've experienced all this before. That's not really what this is about. This is about the vicious circle, the eternal return, the eternal recurrence that is itself returning, that we forget so we may go have more experiences, and that again, it will come back, and it always does. Necessity of experience wills it to, which is complicated as shit.
And we are not aware of it. Like it's a recurrence that is, we are not aware of it, or we don't have a sign to kind of like you know, like speak about it, right? Like it's a forgetting, you know. It started with forgetting, right? And like, but like is it a mode, or I don't know how to say.
We'll get there. We'll get there.
Yeah.
We're not able to quite have that discussion quite yet. Okay. Goodbye. We'll get there. We're not quite at the state of that yet. Trust me, the book is long. Chapter 3, like, it seems like he's saying a lot more. He is, we will be dealing with that. We will be tearing with that. Don't worry. It'll be coming about. Right now, he's answering the very specific question he placed for us. How can willing intervene without forgetting what must now be re-willed? That the nature of these things, that it comes about through the forgetting, through the way these things work. Is this related to the process of building or breaking habits in practical sense? We aren't there yet. We're not there yet. He's right now talking through Nietzsche's experience of the eternal return as Nietzsche talks about the eternal return. We aren't quite at here's how it means to everyday people yet. Here's what it means for everyday life. Right now, it's talking through a rebuilding from the ground up of the concept of the eternal return. That's why I brought up, and again, he's mentioning it specifically here, the cosmological argument or the experiential, all these things that sort of come about as people have broken apart Nietzsche, as people have talked about Nietzsche, people have said these things about the eternal return. He's building it completely differently. And so right now, he's doing that work to build up this new version of it that, again, fundamentally changes how I understand these things. So it's going to be a lot very quickly here. Yeah. That last bit is going to be important, though. I will see it as impossible for it to not have already appeared to me innumerable times, perhaps in other forms. So every iteration of the eternal return, as Klossowski's talking about it, as he's pulling from Nietzsche, actually may have the same content, but it may manifest differently due to contextual, contingent, physiological elements, states, or other elements, ways that it occurred in history, our own lives, our own relationships, where we were at, whatever it may be. So we actually have in this identity in difference, but not repetition. This is kind of, by the way, like a fast version of Deleuze, like a fast version of Deleuze's difference, but this preserves difference as the base of things, without static, simplified repetition, because it's, again, same content manifesting differently due to various configurations of things. Kind of important. But he continues. Again, speaking of it, that it's happened before in other forms, but I had forgotten it, because it is inscribed in the very essence of the circular movement, which I necessarily forget from one state to the next, so that I can reach another state, be thrown outside of myself, even at the risk of everything coming to a stop. It is not an accident. It is not oversimplifying. It is structurally necessary for the circle to function with forgetting. Forgetting is the thing that makes it. It's part of this. It's part of this process by necessity. Continuity of memory, if it was total, would freeze this circuit. It would freeze the circuit. Forgetting enables transitions between these various states. By forgetting, you can move and become in another state. You can deal these things. This is, Plato talks about anamnesis, the way forgetting works as a thing because of truth. It's a whole thing. This is very much flipping the Platonic idealism sort of over itself. Truth requires this, right? Not escaping from it. It's a completely different way to be looking at this. Forgetting enables these new states, which enables new configurations. It's the story of the map. To actually have a subject, to have a focus, you have to have forgetting. Yeah, it's the phrasing he says here is thrown outside of myself, so that I can reach another state and be thrown outside of myself. And it's sort of an interesting way to talk about it, because it's almost like me abandoning myself, self-abandonment. But identity persists only through abandoning yourself. I can reach another state, be thrown outside of myself. How that feels paradoxical. I'm being thrown outside of myself so I can reach another state. How does that operate? How every transition that would be here is basically a total dissolution in its own way. Everything comes to a stop, right? That's what he's saying here. Everything comes to a stop. So existence is basically always on the edge of annihilation. It's always continuously touching into it and coming back from that. It's I can reach another state, be thrown outside of myself, even at the risk of everything coming to a stop. That's like the whole point. Yeah. And even when I will not have forgotten that I had been precipitated outside myself in this life, I nevertheless had forgotten that I was thrown outside myself in another life, one in no way different from this life. If you remember, like, these extraordinary moments that have sort of like happened to you within any iteration, you don't have the ability to remember the between the ecstasy moments. The things you forget within a life, they're distinct from like the ways you forget across lives. Right? when I will have forgotten that I had been precipitated outside myself in this life, I nevertheless have forgotten I had thrown myself in another life, one in no way different from this life. That there's a qualitative sameness, that it is in no way different. This block of life I am living, I lived before. It's qualitatively the same. Like it's different. It's not identical, but there's something there that is the same. And that sameness I'm able to experience as the things that are consistent between them, but I don't remember the transition directly. I also don't remember the transition between various states. The way these things repeat produces a non-identical similarity. This is if you've read Deleuze's work in general, this is Deleuze's eternal return of difference is coming in here. This is what the eternal return of difference is. It's that these things are the same, but they're different. And what the fuck? What are you talking about? It's because they aren't the same. There is a sameness that is consistent, that's drawn across them, but the difference between them is what enables them to be called the same. Otherwise, it would be just rote repetition, and that's not where identity can come from. Repetition itself is non-identitarian similarity. It doesn't operate that thing. It doesn't operate in that same way. And so, as we're talking about when he says here, nevertheless, I've forgotten that I throw myself in no life, one in no way, blah, blah. But he opens, even when I will not have forgotten. There's a weird, like, temporality to the way this is talked about that breaks the way time works, generally, when we talk about it. Even when I will not have forgotten that I had been precipitated outside myself in this life, we're talking about sort of within time, something that transcends time. And so with that, the sentences are harder to read, especially in English or Western languages, because we tend to be very focused on like past tense, present tense, future tense. But with these, you can see that the tense of the grammar itself is collapsing, because we're talking about an almost conceptual impossibility that we are actually able to communicate, which is fucking weird. It's weird. And so when we're talking about like all of this, and we're about to be moving sort of all the way through, there's a lot more points coming, but the thing we're fighting for right here, the thing Klossowski's trying to get across, is that the way willing operates and works across things we've forgotten, and how being across things we've forgotten somehow is able to maintain a sameness and is able to maintain a consistency without it being an identical subject across all of it. The way that these things come about, the way these things work, the way that we can grasp the return itself, the exceptional intensity, the revelatory moment of it, it has to be temporary by necessity. And it is also by necessity forgotten. And it is also by necessity repeated, but not with a memory directly of the repetition, but a knowledge that it had to have happened. Jesus. Oh, this fucking book breaks my brain. I love it. Off topic, random question. If I own a YouTube channel version, does it make me a capital owner? No, I don't know. I think that's the wrong question to be asking. So yeah, this is it. We're introducing fully the paradoxical side of this. And it is not easy, to say the least, because we're about to talk about and get into what I think is forgetting. And for those of you who've been part of, and I think it always helps if any of you have been part of our general reading of Anti-Oedipus. One of the challenges of the schiz, when we talk about it, the schizophrenic process for D&G, is that that whole thing is very much on the edge of breakthrough or breakdown, which is the phrasing they use quite a bit. Breakthrough or breakdown. This would be a time to sort of keep that in the back of your head, because the nuances between that book and this are fascinating, but they are nuances. There's a lot of really fantastic language used here that applies, I think, across both, to be frank. There's also a lot of Bergson in here. Just be ready for that. But this will be fun. Before I move on, is everyone getting that jam so far? Is everyone cool? Bo, it's been a while. How you doing? Hope well. Hope well. Haven't seen Bo show up in a while. We have a handful of people who have been here since 2020. And I think, Bo, if I had to guess, you probably created your account to join your Discord account for this server. You're one of those. It's very fun to see people like that show up back again. It's just good to see you. Sorry to single you out. All right. Then I will continue. At the risk of everything coming to a stop? Is this to say that the movement was stopped at the moment of the sudden revelation? Far from it. The movement was not stopped, for I, myself, Nietzsche, was unable to escape it. This revelation did not come to me as a reminiscence, nor as an experience of déjà vu. Everything would stop for me if I remembered a previous identical revelation, even if I were continually to proclaim the necessity of the return. For it would serve to keep me within myself, and thus outside the truth that I am teaching. It was therefore necessary for me to forget this revelation in order for it to be true. Within the series that I suddenly glimpsed, the series that I must live through in order to be brought back to the same point, the revelation of the eternal return of the same implies that the same revelation could just as well have occurred at any other moment of the circular movement. Indeed, it must be thus. For in order to receive this revelation, I am nothing except this capacity to receive this revelation at all the other moments of the circular movement. Nowhere in particular for me alone, but always in the movement as a whole. The risk of everything coming to a stop. I fucking love this phrasing. He's fucking around. He's fucking around. He's at the risk of everything coming to stop. Is this to say the movement was stopped at the moment of the sudden revelation? No, the movement was not stopped, for I was unable to escape it. Nietzsche, writing about this in his experiences and in his book, there's no way for him to have escaped the thing he's observing. He's observing within the circle. He's not looking back on it. He's not reminiscing over it. He is the content of the circle. He is not a spectator of his own experience. There is no transcendent standpoint that he judges the return from. There's no even, I would probably argue there's no transcendental standpoint from which to judge the return either. This is not a point over here that you'd see it and it works. No. You are the content. Nietzsche was the content of his circle. Right? So this is not, again, Platonic anamnesis, the way forgetting works for Plato. For Plato, we forget of the idealized forms and we see their things out there. We recollect these truths that exist, and we kind of are always coming close to it, but it's not this perfect memory of it. No, this is not that at all. This is not that at all, actually. This is wholly fresh, brand new, in the moment, contingently created experience and content. The movement was not stopped, for I was unable to escape it. This revelation, not a reminiscence, nor as experience of déjà vu. Everything would stop for me if I remembered a previous identical revelation, even if I were continually to proclaim the necessity of the return, for it would serve to keep me within myself and thus outside the truth that I am teaching. Within myself, outside the truth. The phrasing he's using here is about the nature of the sort of way that experience exists. To remain within myself is to be outside the truth. Existence requires being outside oneself. The phrasing that Nietzsche uses for this is ekstasis. Which German Klossowski's using it too. The ekstasis, outside of self, the exterior of things, the ekstasis. This is not that the doctrine is the living doctrine. This is not an intellectual assent of the ego subject. Actual realization dissolves the subject. So, Zarathustra, who had animals, I'm not teaching Nietzsche here. I'm presuming you have some level of read. If not, go read Zarathustra. It's pretty good. Zarathustra's animals misunderstand when they chatter about the return. They chatter about it. They make it conceptual rather than lived. This is not... someone in chat kept asking questions. So is it like when I do this? Is it like when I do this? There you go. The animals chatter. Chatter. Bullshit. Fuck around. Talk about it. Conceptualize. Intellectualize. Nietzsche's not doing that. Nietzsche's talking about actual lived fucking experience within self. Outside of truth. Not that thing. Authentic existence requires being outside oneself. Outside of self. Ekstasis. Yes, again, it is paradoxical. Yes, again, it is seemingly self-contradictory. That's kind of the fucking point, actually, for a lot of this, but we'll be getting through that. But it's this idea of self-enclosed truth. Everything would stop for me if I remembered a previous identical revelation, even if I were continually to proclaim the necessity of the return. It would serve to keep me within myself and thus outside the truth I am teaching. If Nietzsche remembered previous revelations, he would have a stable self-identity. He would be kept within himself. Kept within myself, he would say. And this contradicts the doctrine he's teaching. The truth of the eternal return requires betrayal through forgetting it. So he says, please go for it.
So the nature of forgetting is that it creates, right? It creates, but it creates this thing, right? But at the same time, like how kind of after you kind of did this kind of like Nietzsche is not like his own agency, the dissolution of the subject, right? The kind of the the self is kind of dissolved, right? Mm-hmm. So how kind of like we reproduce the nature of willing through this kind of forgetting, right? How can we kind of forget at first, right? And after that, we reproduce this kind of thing, right? We reproduce willing, right, through it. Like how we do that, right? It's almost kind of like impossible.
Well, sure, but it's also necessary. As he says, it was therefore necessary for me to forget this revelation in order for it to be true. Because again, if he had a stable self. If he remembered literally everything and had a stable self, that one, this revelation wouldn't be happening. And we would have a very deep version of this, but that's not what's happening. The way the circle operates is we are aware of it for a moment, and then experience continues. And we have forgotten that we had these transitions between these states when we go from being sad to tired to hungry to angry, whatever it is. We don't actually, we are aware of the transition, and then we're that thing, but we don't have consistency through them. It's the awareness of that transition would destroy the ability for us to be hungry, sad, angry, anything. Because if we were aware, we would have a seriously stable self that would end up bending towards a single normative line. In this way, we actually are able to, as we forget and as we re-experience and constantly move, we're able to have new experiences. We're able to do new things. We're able to understand ourselves differently. We're able to relate to things differently. The truth shifts what it means, right? It's not knowledge. It's not the Western epistemological tradition of Plato through Descartes, right? This idea of like knowledge and wisdom and truth, but instead an inversion of that. Forgetting is not failure. It is required.
Yeah. It's an active force, as Deleuze said. It's an active force.
Well, and Nietzsche talks about it in a very bodily way, where he talks about it like digestion. He talks about it like digestion for a reason, that it's that the same way that we digest food, you must digest thought. And he calls it dyspeptic, which is a oldie term for like, you know, burping or vomiting or having acid reflux or like having indigestion. But he calls it mental dyspepsia. Like that's the idea, is like, but it's you're mentally not digesting, you're mentally like not handling the things, and you're mentally vomiting. And it's the same thing. And just like you don't maintain all the food in your stomach forever, and every meal doesn't remember every other meal, why would every experience remember every other experience?
Yeah.
And that's, as he goes on, he says, within this series that I suddenly glimpse, so we're at the bottom of the page here, the series that I must live through in order to be brought back to the same point, the revelation of the eternal return of the same, implies that the same revelation could just as well have occurred at any other moment of the circular movement. Indeed, it must be thus. The revelation necessarily is contingent. It can occur at any moment. There's no, it happens at every 17 minutes and 32 seconds if you're at 42 degrees north. Like it's not that. It can occur at any moment, must occur at some moment, right? So there's an arbitrary necessity in it. I think that's the wording I would use. It's an arbitrary necessity. And necessity in like the Spinozist sense of a thing, right? There's a total determination, but with an indeterminacy of when. But it will happen. It's just going to happen. Like you're there. It's just happening. It's there. It's happening. Right. And here, the series that I suddenly glimpsed, the series that I must live through, the series here, this is not dialectical progression. Series is directly counter to Hegel. I know you are a fan of that, Marcellus, and that world, so you might know better than me, but it's, Hegel is not a big fan of the series idea. For him, it's dialectical. It's a different setup. It's a different progression. But instead, this is Hume. This is empiricism and subjectivity. Go read it from Deleuze. This is succession, but without Hume's like necessary connection to each thing. Each moment is discrete, singular. The series is itself a series of singularities, is itself circular. Deleuze builds on this or alongside this. This is very much the static genesis, the static logical and the static ontological genesis from Logic of Sense. This is that. This is very much that. He's introducing the series for a reason. He's doing that. This is all of these things. And as we have series, this changes the way that moments and the singular elements work in series. There is no privileged singular instant as a thing. There's no... Nietzsche has this chapter may open with the Silmarie experience from Nietzsche and his writings from that. But this is not saying that there's a superiority in that moment over any other moment. The series is the thing. And the series repetition is the thing. But how it repeats and that it will repeat is the thing. So it's like just deeply opposed to teleology in any version of it. Man, this fucking book. It's a little complex. But he says, indeed it must be thus, for in order to receive this revelation, I am nothing except this capacity to receive this revelation at all the other moments of the circular movement, nowhere in particular for me alone, but always in the movement as a whole. I am nothing except. My ego is a functional site for this. It is not a autonomous agent. It is in this. This is not for me. Things aren't built for me, for this me, for that me. The movement of the whole is me. The circular movement is me. Not that there is a stable me, but it is that I am a pure receptivity. I am a pure capacity without substrate. This is not Descartes' anything, to be frank. I am a potentiality for revelation without stability. It's a huge, huge statement here. Nowhere in particular for me alone, but always in the movement as a whole. Just to reread that last part, because it's a lot. For in order to receive this revelation, I am nothing except this capacity to receive this revelation at all the other moments of the circular movement. Nowhere in particular for me alone, but always in the movement as a whole. The next little thing, Nietzsche speaks of the eternal return of the same as the supreme thought, but also as the supreme feeling, this highest feeling. It is not conceptual, it is not intellectual. Supreme thought, but also the supreme feeling. Thought and feeling, thought and affect are united here. They're the same thing. This is, again, against the dualism of thought and feeling or mind-body or any of that shit. Yes, this is the experience of experience. Just pointing at the thing that the hard problem itself refers to while trying to avoid bringing in the baggage of self like the -o of cogito without the self. It is, again, I think Klossowski's writing does an exceptional job of it. This is very difficult shit to write. Because we're not talking about the return of thought. That's intellectualizing almost. That's an identity that's playing in a different beast. We're not talking about feeling. We're talking as feeling. We're talking about return in thought. The highest, as Nietzsche's writing it, when Nietzsche's notebooks, when you read them, Nietzsche's notebooks go at length about the highest and how that when he says such a thing, when he's talking about this exceptional tonality or highest whatever, it's about intensity, but also quantity. So there's this thing happening where it's not higher than other stuff. That's not what he's saying. He's not saying it's the highest in terms of like, oh, that mountain range is higher than that. But instead that it's almost an absolute elevation itself that just exists in its own category. It is not representational. It can't be conceptual. It fucks with everything literally this fucks with Western tradition, especially Western Christian tradition of dualism. And it's what makes this book, I think, really exceptional, is because Klossowski's trying to somehow intellectualize in writing this thing. I think he does it. This is why this book is fucking written the way it is. It's an impossible articulation of an impossible doctrine. So good for you, Klossowski. This is not easy shit, to say the least. I love this passage. The words kind of negates the feeling I have for it because it's very, it's powerful. It's forceful, is what I tend to say when I talk about the book. It's forceful. Like you feel it in a lot of different ways. I feel it in a lot of different ways. So this paragraph, really the last two paragraphs-ish, before we move into the next little bit. Basically the last page. Yeah, I think we'll go back over it and then we're going to be moving forward to the next little bit because yeah, I mean, we're about to get into like, he literally just lays out the steps of it, which sounds so weird to say after everything I've just said, but we'll get to it. So the things to, at this point, understand Klossowski's trying to get across. Memory, remembering things would freeze this circle. It would break the circle of experience, right? If we remembered every iteration of things, it would give us a continuous singular identity. And that continuous singular identity would break this dissolving, reforming movement that the circle, as Nietzsche's talking about it, very much requires. And with that, knowledge would be ecstatic, to be very particular about word usage, ecstatic displacement, right? If I'm going to remain within myself through memory, it would also be outside truth. Basically, that very traditional, boring Socratic idea of know thyself is the opposite. It's forget thyself. No, that's what he's saying. It's the opposite. It's the opposite. Nietzsche is fucking crazy, but it's the opposite of like that very wine mom fucking phrasing. In order to have this revelation, the revelation itself is, I wouldn't even say in order to have it, the revelation itself is necessary anywhere and nowhere. It doesn't have a privileged thing, or how to say, oh, here's what you need to do. You need to be underneath the Bodhi tree in order to meditate. Oh, you need to be away from the city. Oh, you need to really be within yourself. No. There's no moment and no element or anything that is privileged or special. Every moment has the potential for it, and some moment must bear this revelation. So there is total necessity and total contingency built in. And lastly, identity, because of this, is now a site of potentials. It is not a substantial molded self or soul. Nietzsche is not an agent of revelation. He is the occasion of it. That's how I'd phrase that. He is the occasion of it. I like that word for that. Yeah. Been reading a bunch of Plato for classes and continually appreciative of Nietzsche's scholarship on his critique of Socrates' Plato. His critiques of Plato are exceptional. They actually have helped me understand Plato in a way. We had I don't know if anyone here remembers Derek, who joined us for the Logic of Sense readings and What is Philosophy. Derek is, I mean, I don't want to call him a Neoplatonist, but he is very much an expert in Plato. Like his scholarship on it is exceptional. And a lot of his stuff I was not capable of dealing with, but I went back and I was trying to go back and reread Plato, and someone recommended that I go back and reread along with it Nietzsche's critique. It actually helped me understand Plato significantly, because it's like a good critique will do that. The same way that I would say I had issues understanding Kant until I made my way through how Deleuze utilized him. And then I was able to go back and go, oh, fuck, here is how these things connect. It helps. Good critiques help. But Nietzsche is just brutal with what he does. It's amazing. It's amazing. Excellent. Let's see. I have a note in here about going through Deleuze's writings on nomadic thought, because that's a little bit what's happening here. But I think I'll pass on that today, because we're just going to, I think, get into, we're just going to move forward. Fuck it. My professor helped. He's a hardcore Neoplatonist. He explains things the exact way Nietzsche is tearing apart. That's yeah. Yeah, it's good stuff. Does anyone have any questions or comments on any of this? Because we're about to, this next paragraph's not bad, but then we get into what I'm hoping is going to be people disagreeing and having discussions with me on, because it gets wild very quick here. All right. Nietzsche is a strange loop. I've had people on the server and YouTube shit on Hofstadter. I don't think you should shit on Hofstadter. I don't think he's great, but I really do like his writings, and some of his other stuff's pretty wonderful. So, but I Am a Strange Loop is actually a pretty interesting read. From a logical positivist position or empiricism perspective, it's not bad. It's not perfect. It's not bad. So this continues the little sort of a side thought that we ended with last. Hence, Nietzsche speaks the eternal return as the same as the supreme thought, but also as the supreme feeling, the highest feeling, right? Hence, in an unpublished note contemporaneous with The Gay Science, he writes, quote, "My doctrine teaches, live in such a way that you must desire to live again. This is your duty. You will live again in any case. He for whom striving procures the highest feeling, let him strive. He for whom repose procures the highest feeling, let him rest. For he for whom belonging, following, and obeying procures the highest feeling, let him obey, provided that he becomes aware of what procures the highest feeling, and that he shrinks back from nothing. Eternity depends on it." And earlier he had noted that present humanity no longer knows how to wait. as nature endowed with an internal soul fit for an eternal becoming and a future amelioration, are able to do. Here, the emphasis is placed less on willing than on desire and necessity, and this desire and this necessity are themselves linked to eternity. Whence the reference to the highest feeling, or, in Nietzschean terms, the hohe Stimmung, the high tonality of the soul. So Nietzsche lays out here, and it's actually a fairly well-known, it's an unpublished, it's still very well-known piece from him, which is its own sort of thing. The phrasing can be taken a lot of different ways. So let's just go through it bit by bit. My doctrine teaches live in such a way you must desire to live again. This is your duty. You will live again in any case. This is not saying, this is, there's a little bit of a ironic flourish that he plays with at the end here. This is the ethics of the eternal return that people talk about. This is the ethical demand, or whatever you want to call it. People have lots of names for this. Live in such a way that you must desire to live again. This is your duty. You will live again in any case. And then he lays out sort of a handful of people who, examples of people. This is if you want to take the extreme side of his perspectivist view, this is about the constitution of the person, the way that they're handling things, how they're going about all of this, and says basically, there is no single form of good. I don't know why I'm so tired suddenly. There's no single form of good, right? There's no rational will that is universalized, that can be intellectualized or compared. Every nature of a person, every nature of a thing must discover its own maximum intensity. He doesn't have the ability to tell you, oh, do these 16 things, right? You don't. But he's very clear. He goes through it. But then he says, provided he becomes aware of what procures the highest feeling, and that he shrinks back from nothing. The eyes wide open about one's own affects is necessary. Self-awareness, being aware of what does procure that high tonality, that desire that does this. This is the thing he's pushing for. And he says that shrinks back from nothing. It is about affirmation without rejection or exception. This is not cherry picking moments of, that, yay, going for something and then going, oh, but not that much because people will make fun of me, or people will do this, or the hesitancy or lack of confidence. Go boldly into it. Go boldly into it. It is, for he says, let him obey. This is not master or slave morality. It's if that happens to produce the highest intensity of the type. If this is your truth, live your truth. There's this thing that he's got that a lot of people misread. Philosophy Tube and other fucks who don't actually read any of this. They think there's like this aristocratic ethic that Nietzsche's pushing. It's not. It's not that. He is saying, and he's saying so boldly here, whatever it is, let him obey, let him blah, 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 let him strive. It doesn't matter. Let him rest. Let the people find the highest of themselves. And that is the thing. It is beyond good and evil. We're beyond good and evil. This is driving that. It is not about cherry picking moments. It is not about having the shameful pushed away, the things that nauseate us pushed away, the painful. No, will everything fully. This is the test. And he says eternity depends on it. And it's not really a joke, but it's a little bit of it's clear he's got an exclamation point. Eternity depends on it. And there's a little bit of and even in German, it reads like, it's your choice determines the structure of the cosmic order. the eternity of things. Your eternity, the subjective generative experience of life depends on this affirmation of everything. Eternal return seems very pro self-care. Yes. But also not if you shy away from the service of others because you're like, oh, I've got to focus on myself. That's what people keep telling me. Bad you. No, bad. The highest of things is the thing he's driving at. It is not self-preservation. Yes, it is self-overcoming and overcoming the rejections that are part of that. And he says, and Klossowski adds, and earlier he had noted that present humanity no longer knows how to wait, as nature endowed with an eternal soul, fit for an eternal becoming and a future amelioration, are able to. Nietzsche wrote sort of an odd... Nietzsche wrote a lot of different shit about Christianity and pre-Christian, pre-moderns, all of these things. But specifically, there's this weird way that we no longer wait. And again, this was written in the 1800s. So just imagine the nightmare if Nietzsche saw how people considered themselves and felt about the world today. Instant gratification, the elimination of waiting, the no speed limit of experience that happens now. Louis C.K. had one of my favorite bits of all time on this, where he said, this was like 6 years ago. He's like, I just learned that internet on planes is a thing. You can connect to Wi-Fi. Because I was on the flight here, they said, hey, we're happy to introduce to you we have Wi-Fi on this flight. And then about 10 minutes into the flight, Wi-Fi went down. And they said, I'm sorry, blah, blah, it's not working. And the guy sitting next to him said, well, this is bullshit. He's like, what the fuck? How entitled are we as a people? Something you just learned existed for the first time in your life. And 10 minutes later, it's something that you're owed. And that this is the diagnosis of modernity Nietzsche's critiquing, that capacity to endure present suffering for future transformation is gone. The thing that and Nietzsche laments, it's one of the things he laments about the destruction of Christianity, is that at least those things had this sort of long-term horizon in mind, right? Like at least they gave us, I mean, he's not happy with it, but at least it did this thing. There's this ambivalence in Nietzsche as he's writing about these things. We had this illusion in pre-modern societies of this eternal soul. And it's really weird because it built this psychological capacity in us that we lack as a modern in the world of moderns. And the genealogy Nietzsche gives isn't one of condemnation, right? It's more the cost of our liberation from Christianity also takes these things. It's one of the things I adore about Nietzsche's critique of Christianity is it's not the Reddit atheists, oh, off we go, because you end up in the same trap. Nietzsche's very, very aware of all the parts, and some he's wistful almost for, and this is one of those. There's this thing we don't know how to wait. As nature's endowed with an eternal soul, fit for an eternal becoming and future amelioration are able to do. Here, the emphasis is placed less on willing than on desire and necessity. And this desire and this necessity are themselves linked to eternity, whence the reference to the highest feeling, or in Nietzschean terms, the hohe Stimmung, the high tonality of the soul. This is Klossowski is very particular about his wording here. Here the emphasis, he says, is placed less on willing than on desire and necessity. And this desire and this necessity themselves are linked to eternity. This is a terminological shift in how we're talking about things through Nietzsche and how we're talking about things through Klossowski, how we're talking about all of this, will implies a rational actor, an agent, Schopenhauer-y bullshit. Desire is unconscious, bodily, intensive. This is again, desire, not I want something, but like desire, the forces, the impulses, the flux for Deleuze, the libido for Freud. By emphasizing this, and this is, I think, a big thing Klossowski's making do with here, by making this move to the bodily and away from the individual will, that of the agent, he's derationalizing the eternal return. And he's playing more with, again, necessity and desire. And stepping away from willing, because willing is that of an agent. The last few paragraphs, last few sections have slowly been making this build, so I'm not going to make the argument for him. I think he's done a very good job for it here. Because this is, again, necessity. Desire is bodily. Necessity is not physical causation. It's not an external compulsion of things, but it is internal compulsion. It is a drive structure built. It is by necessity. This is Spinoza, Freud, a little bit here, actually. There isn't distance between desire and subject within these guys. It is one and the same. Necessity builds this. And so as such, as we're making our way through the rest of this, he says, and it was in such a high tonality of soul, such a stimmung, that Nietzsche experienced the moment when the eternal return was revealed to him. We went through this a few pages ago, the Silmarie 1881 pieces, and he writes 6,000 feet beyond man and time, this extraordinary moment. But for Klossowski, it is an exemplary moment. Not because it built the thought. This is not where he's saying, oh, this made the thing. But instead, it crystallized the problem he's trying to solve.
I have a weird question that's hopefully not too much of a distraction from this, but is there any way to know what Nietzsche might have thought of the notion of multiple experiences existing within the same mind? Because there's these competing wills to power, essentially, right? Mm-hmm. That can maybe coexist even in a moment. And if consciousness or experience can dim in a given moment, like we often call it brain fog, right? Is it possible that that's like splitting to somewhere else, or something along those lines? Is there any
Nietzsche tended to talk about, so as far as like actually talking about it in terms of like multiple personalities or multiple revelations, like this stuff didn't really exist in that terminology. I'd have to go back and like dig. Maybe August has a reference directly, but the way Nietzsche spoke of all of this is we are a battleground. You exist as a battleground of the impulses, and the victor is what comes out, basically. And so he very much considered that we were always multifaceted in all of these ways, that there were just an extraordinary amount of sort of affective impulses that are driving and pushing, and that we exist sort of at the end of that process and what is produced by the interactions of those.
That makes sense. So I suppose then the question would be, if there are the sides that lose, I suppose he doesn't have access to Freud, so it's less likely for him to like have this thought, but the sides that lose might still, in a sense, be in there.
Oh, they don't go away, correct. No, Nietzsche talked about this. They don't go away. It's a matter of what surfaces and what comes out and what battles. And again, yeah, like August is saying, there's not really a centralized subject for Nietzsche to talk about multiple personalities or any of that. For him, it would literally be the grouping of all of these things. and how it comes out. This is, for example, resentment. Resentment is not like, oh, resentment one. That's not really how it works. It's not a singular thing. I'm probably oversimplifying when I'm saying this. Instead, it's all of the forces are at once, like the result is what is produced. So when, for example, the sheep, I'm just going to use the easy example, the sheep sees an eagle come down and snatch its child and go off and fly off and eat it. The sheep experiences an extraordinary slew of kind of everything. Very upset at the world, angry at the eagle, frustrated it can't do anything about that, but also realizing its own impotence and the lack of its own potential in being able to do any of those things. All of this non-intellectualized, all of these forces come together. And as they come together, there's kind of a weird mishmash of stuff. There is this impotence of being able to do anything that absolutely is just exceptionally powerful. It's a horrifying experience. Why can't I do anything? Well, I can't fly. I can't do those stuff. So what happens is that empowering and that self sort of that becomes justification falls back on itself. And the sheep goes, well, that's incredible. If I could fly, I certainly wouldn't do such a thing. This is a inversion, but it's all of these forces again coming to light all at once. For D&G, who I would say Deleuze probably runs with this, and Guattari, of course, runs with it the best. The way that they talk about it, and they sort of evolve Nietzsche to this, when they talk about someone who believes they're Jesus Christ or Napoleon, and they're that is because all of the forces that make them up, they're pulling from all of the semiotic structures that exist in order to justify it. The same way that you say, I am hungry, but you're not. There's no such thing as hungry. It's a weird combination of forces that are producing that you have in memory and you have repeated over and over. Oh, I am hungry Reed. Oh, this is hungry Reed. That's how hungry Reed feels. The same would be true of, oh, I'm Jesus Reed or Napoleon Reed. There's no difference there except for what we understand how the meaning is made. And that break that enables people to be sort of on that, what they call the autistic schizophrenic spectrum of things, that shatters the sort of normative connection of those meanings, drives their understanding of how one produces a subjectivity that understands itself as Jesus, who's no more lying or inventing any of it than I am saying I am Brooks. I'm no more connected to Brooks except an odd consistency we've all sort of agreed is the way that works.
That makes sense. I'm generally in agreement with all of that. It's the there's a somewhat like weirder critique of kind of phenomenological thinking in general, where there's an experience that presents itself to the outside world and reports itself to others, and in a way, it seems to be very like blended with like working memory and attention, and it is highly like it wants to be responsible for the body, right? But then we have things like split brain studies and like the multiple drafts theory, and that's kind of the basis on which I would ask: is there anything to indicate? Probably not in Nietzsche, but maybe even in people commenting on it, if there are people who are discussing like, why is it that this particular cognitive process that represents itself is supposedly given experience, but other things that might be also in the cognitive processes in the mind, but are not capable of representing themselves to others, we often consider them not to.
I'm trying to think of a good book that goes in that direction. Deleuze has Essays Clinical and Critical, which absolutely touches into this. And then What is Philosophy ends with the final two sections being about the brain and the nature of sort of the biological sensory apparatuses and how those things then sort of are part of this mechanism. Those would be the simpler versions. I'll have to think on that as far as a larger, maybe someone who's listening has a better recommendation, but that would probably be the best I can do. Sorry.
No, it's very, very much like a modern, recent problem to think about. But yeah, thank you.
Well, it is. It's for any of it, I would probably go back to. I think generally the answers. I mean, within Spinoza for me. I mean, Malibu. Oh, yeah, know what? Malibu, fucking Malibu. 1 second. Malibu's the new wounded. There you go. Malibu's the new wounded. I mean, Catherine Malibu in general. 1 sec. I have a couple of hers. I'll toss them in chat. Give me 2 seconds. Malibu's a perfect one. Thank you. There we go. And Malibu Boo. Close enough. So the new wounded subtitle, From Neurosis to Brain Damage. She's a brilliant, like I don't even know what I would call her, because she's very well studied and understands things in a like traditional scientific neurological sense, but I would put her in a philosophical tradition far first. She's phenomenal. She's brilliant. She's a neurophilosopher. It's probably the best way. But the ontology of the accident, which I included there, it's an essay on destructive plasticity, is transformative. So literally those books, all four of these books are on that. The book here on Parrhesia that I included, it's her paper on Parrhesia, is phenomenal.
Perfect.
Man, this shit's awesome. Man, I forgot how good this was. Because this is about her piece on Parrhesia, from Parrhesia, is on the eternal return and the phantom of difference. It's about Klossowski's piece here. So it kind of, if there's a thing that could possibly be more exactly what you're asking for at this moment, I'm not sure there's a contingent reality of this. Like she's phenomenal and it's perfect. You'll love it. It's a minimum. It's a super fun read, but it's really brilliant. God, she's good. She's so fun to read. She's her earlier stuff is a little bit more dry as time has gone on, and she's clearly gotten more comfortable with her own voice. I find her to be very lyrical and very fun to read. More of her later stuff and everything. She's fantastic.
So Parrhesia, I hadn't been familiar with the word. I kind of just looked it up now. It seems to be that it has to do with things that aren't what the ego seems to be able to take responsibility for or claim knowledge of, but still make their way to the surface.
Yes.
Makes sense. Perfect. Thank you.
God, she's great. Sorry, I shouldn't have opened that. Why did I open that PDF? God, that'll just be the rest of my day. Catherine Malibu's wonderful. There you go. Read more Malibu. But now we go, and it's we're going to do each of these in order. How can a tonality of the soul, a Stimmung, become a thought? And how can the highest feeling, the höchste Gefühl, namely the eternal return, become the supreme thought? Well, there's a few steps for it. You ready? This is a lot as we sort of go through this. This is a lot. God damn it. This is basically, this is a semiotic structure based on Yomslevian glossomatics, but very much built as a unique thing for Klossowski. It is an alternative to basically all the semiotics you probably have read. There is no referent. There is no stable signifier or signified. Meaning is purely relation. And there's a lot of implications here. So There's a lot. This is a fucking lot. So if anyone here has like, oh, I like semiotics, you're in the right fucking place. That's for sure. You're in the right fucking place. So this is how the highest feeling becomes the supreme thought. This is how semiotic elements are generated. Okay? 1. The tonality of the soul is a fluctuation of intensity. Okay. By the way, if you've read Anti-Oedipus a few times and dealt with that, welcome as well. Affect is itself intensive. Intensity is the fundamental thing. Intensities are not secondary qualities of consciousness. They are the primary things. The tonality of the soul is a fluctuation of intensity. 2, in order for it to be communicable, the intensity must take itself as an object and thus turn back on itself. 3, in turning back on itself, the intensity interprets itself. But how can it interpret itself? By becoming a counterweight to itself. For this, the intensity must divide, separate from itself, come back together. Now, this is what happens to the intensity in what could be called moments of rise and fall. However, it is always the same fluctuation. A wave in the concrete sense. We might note in passing the importance of the spectacle of sea waves in Nietzsche's Contemplations. 4. But does an interpretation presuppose the search for a signification? Rise and fall, these are designations, nothing else. Is there any signification beyond this observation of a rise and fall? Intensity never has any meaning other than that of being an intensity. In itself, the intensity seems to have no meaning. What is a meaning? How can it be constituted? What is the agent of meaning? Well, 5. The agent of meaning, and thus of signification, once again, seems to be the intensity, depending on its various fluctuations. If intensity by itself has no meaning, other than that of being an intensity, how can it be the agent of signification, or be signified as this or that tonality of the soul? We asked above how it could interpret itself. We answered that in its risings and fallings, it had to act as a counterweight. But this is nothing more than a simple observation. How then does it acquire a meaning, and how is meaning constituted by the intensity? Precisely by turning back on itself, even in a new fluctuation, by turning back on itself, by repeating and, as it were, imitating itself, it becomes a sign. But a sign is first of all the trace of a fluctuation of intensity. If a sign retains its meaning, it is because the degree of intensity coincides with it. It signifies only through a new afflux of intensity, which in a certain manner joins up with its first trace. 7. But a sign is not only the trace of a fluctuation, it can also mark an absence of intensity, and here too, a new afflux is necessary, if only to signify this absence. I mean, that's a fucking entire semiotic philosophy, like, summarized insanely tight. This is a fuck you to this assholes. This is a fuck you to anyone who's ever said, like, oh, critical theory never says how stuff works and never really gets this stuff. It's like, it explains things. Yeah, I mean, literally, it's like in 7 steps, he's gone through all of what it takes for us to have words. So, like, for us to have meaning, for us to have, like, this is intense. It's a lot. This is so much fucking here. Okay. First off, anytime you see fluctuation, if you want to substitute flux from another book, feel free to. Because that's what's happening here. The flux is what matters. It's not flow. Fuck you. The tonality of a soul is a fluctuation of intensity. That's it. That's it. It's very simple. This is a...
So the difference between flux and flow, I take it this has got to do with the differential versus just the substrate itself in motion?
Yes, correct.
That makes sense. Okay.
Correct. Stimmung is not a static state. The tonality of the soul is not a static state. It is a fluctuation of intensity. It is a dynamic process, a fluctuation, a Schwankung, fucking Germans. It's Nietzsche's term for it. It's a fluctuation. It's a shifting, dynamic process. Affect cannot become thought because it's already sort of proto-semiotic activity. It's already doing that. It's already there. It already has something. It's already doing the thing. It's playing in that space. It's doing its jams. Two, in order for it to be communicable, because remember, we're talking about how the highest feeling can become the supreme thought. How does this happen? Well, to be communicable, the intensity must take itself as an object and thus turn back on itself. Right? So, communication requires objectification. Right? We need an object of a sentence. A thing must be said. In order to be communicable, we must be talking about a thing, an object. Intensity must become its own object to have this. Philosophers have talked about this for a long time. This is Fichte. This is Hegel. But this is a material version of it. This isn't like transcendental self-positing, but instead a physical auto-affection, self-affective experience. The intensity takes itself as object and turns back on itself. And in turning back on itself, the intensity interprets itself. Fluctuation of intensity occurs. The intensity takes itself as object, turns back on itself, and interprets itself. But how can it interpret itself? What? Does so by becoming a counterweight to itself. For this, the intensity must divide, separate from itself, come back together. Come back together. This is not a pre-existing subject performing interpretation of an intensive thing. Intensity is interpreting itself. It does so by splitting or doubling. A bloop does that. There we go. This is signs all the way down. There's not a signifying subject behind anything. This is excessively radical in this space. It's fine if you're not super into semiotics, but this is the jam. Please.
Are they also then necessarily kind of implying the post-structuralist trace that all intensity or signal or information or flux, it is deeply entangled with everything around it. Like fundamentally, in order for any force to move through the world, and for it all to be considered a world, it all has to be structurally connected in some capacity. And this removes the possibility for anything to actually be separate from another thing or fail to include it in its sign or signal in a manner of speaking.
I would maybe argue that it's even more radical than that there's not even the trace.
What would you replace it with?
Well, so the trace presumes something pre-existing, that there is a prior unity that things are being derived from, that it is part of that in any capacity. This I read, he's very specific that these are novel, new things. This is something very different to that. And so when we say things like in turning back on itself, it splits, the intensity interprets itself. It does this by becoming a counterweight. It divides, it separates from itself, and then comes back together. The there's a there's a thing Klossowski's doing here where it's a little bit the splitting, but it's a splitting that's not pathological. It's constitutive, not defensive. And
in a manner speaking, isn't there a problem with sort of like conflating the isomorphism of like time and causality?
But there's no causality here.
There's a structure behind how things tend to propagate, right? Like your current moment experience, what you might consider presence, is structured by what is absent, in a manner of speaking, and this helps inform how presence can direct itself in a meaningful way in orientation with the outside world.
Where's the absence? Sorry.
It's not a where, it's more of a what. It's structure itself. It's like the notion that what we are, well, we are there is like a presence absence distinction, as in there are things that are more present to us and things that are less present to us. And at a certain like point from wherever you are locally in this like field of flux, right? There is there's like a fading off, and there are things which are absent, which one assumes in a like pragmatic sense and an analytical sense that these are structured such that you can meaningfully navigate what is absent, but
See, I very much read this differently. That there is no absence, that things are in themselves generative and whole, and that in the creation or generation of elements that we make things, we make signifiers that have or signs, whatever it may be, that have an absence. But that is basically a signification of absence that's required to do that and to create absence itself. There's no negation in any of this. I guess I'm not following where negation would pop into this, like in that sense.
The forgetting that was mentioned, where the experience is turned back on something that previously was present and is now forgotten, such that it can become a truth that can be apprehended from an exterior perspective, right? And so the truth is now absent, but the markers and elements of structure and some belief about the structured nature of the truth is now what is present. That's the way I would think of it in terms of like locally, I'm no longer apprehending the whole thought that I had, but rather I'm apprehending markers that are like creating a semiotic scaffolding that allow me to make sense of structure that I believe is there through the usage of like basically information bottlenecks. They're like homomorphisms or like partial homomorphisms that enable us to believe that. So like a crystal structure, for example, right? If you know where one particle within it is, I mean, particles aren't real, but we don't care. If you know where one particle is, in a manner of speaking, you know where every other particle in the entire lattice is, as long as the temperature is low enough.
Mm-hmm.
And so in order to make sense of the entire thing, you can develop an abstract algebraic structure that allows you to know where one particle is and infer how other things will act around that thing by like calculating where a collision might occur, for example. And so you don't need to apprehend the whole structure. The structure itself in its entirety remains absent, but the semiotic structure that is built on top of it, that folds back on this thing, compresses the information, right?
Right, but as you're talking about it, the absence of intensity necessitates or requires intensity to be signified, which means to mark the nothing, you actually have to affirmatively expend energy to do it. And as such, absence isn't simple absence. It's actually a positively produced thing.
Yes, I would agree, but I would also, I'd say there's like a transcendental indeterminacy where absence is like an open multiplicity from the perspective of a living thing or cognition in the world, basically, such that like, the thing that you're interacting with, well, you know that it's structured in some capacity, you don't necessarily know what that structure is. So if I like roll a die under a cup and I place the cup over the top of it, generally speaking, most of us, based off of our experience, will agree that the die is actually oriented in a particular way, right? Or rather, that
right. But even still, that would explain negativity or the absence as being at best parasitical. That it can only be registered with an intensive investment or structure or expenditure. That it doesn't have an independent existence itself. It's only derivative.
Only if one takes the perspective that presence either has to be entirely global or like non-existent or like solipsistic. But if instead you think of it in terms of localities, where there's a coherence of information that can flow or signal that can flow between regions, then the die itself also has presence. It just is non-local to mine, such that my like open multiplicity of what can or how I can see the world is still open on all of 1 through 6.
Right, but that would be but you're talking about like at that point the perspective apprehension of the structure. It's not ontologically lacking structure itself.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree, but there's like
which would put it towards the end of the process. And again, if we're talking about the end of the process, it would mean that it is generated affirmatively. And yes, it's there. These things happen, but signs necessarily require a positive energetic investment to even register as nothing, even in those crystals or those things. Even for us to register them as nothing requires us to register them as something, which happens to be nothing. There isn't just a nothing in and of itself.
True, but the like a pointer doesn't actually include all of the information that is absent. It is actually a claim that there is absence in that direction or in a location. It's a recipe for how to make absence present to a locality.
I'm not sure. See, I may not be able to argue it completely, but it's for me when we talk about things like you mentioned, forgetting, and how forgetting is like it seems like it seems like a negative. It's a loss of a memory. It's an absence of continuity. But forgetting is for Nietzsche of an affirming force. It's active. It is a productive erasure. It's not just simply decay or negation or an absence itself. The organism of forgetting, the digestion is doing something, metabolism and digesting experience. So it's, again, I'm trying to figure out where absence comes in, except as an affirming product in this.
I see. So the there's more of like a discomfort with the negative notion of the absence rather than, because I would agree. Like I believe that when I think of ontology, the fundamental thing that is required for me to consider something to exist is that in some capacity it's structurally related to other things, or it has behavior, basically, right? And so this is fundamentally a positive, productive force. And so for me, when I say absence, what I mean is this is a structure which is through some set of relationships able to connect to others, but it is not present from the perspective of a locality. None of this is like pure like positive negative like dichotomy or like dualism, but rather it's all of like a spectrum of the coherence of information. And as like an example that I like to use for how this like signal propagates, if I'm looking on a clear day, I can see for miles, right? So the signal that's encoded in the light that reaches my eyes remains very coherent. There's a lot of information there, but a few feet through fog and it diffuses out into nothing.
Yes.
And by nothing, I mean transcendentally nothing, not like materially nothing, right?
Right. But not being a thing requires recognizing things' presence or usual presence. To note alteration, to construct a negation affirmatively. These are intensive investments from the ground up. There's no negative that's there without being constructed as the negative or as the absence. Silence is heard.
I agree. And I think like Derrida, who has kind of taken the idea from, when he says like architecture, he, I believe, means that he's talking about the structure that...
how do we even say it in English? Difference? I've been always wondered, like, it's difference and difference. It doesn't work in English, but yeah, no. And I think with Derrida, because ultimately for him, it's not really decidable, right? That's the phrasing. It's he talks about there's no primary between having or not having, or haves or have nots, absence or having, but in this, and again, I've liked some of Derrida's writing. I found Klossowski and all this to be a lot more my jam, but for Klossowski, presence is primary. Like it's the way, and he reads it in Nietzsche, and I would say for sure in Deleuze this would follow, and a few others. So for that, it's again, man, it would be a really interesting thing to start talking about, like the trace and difference, and relate them to this, because this is all of their readings of the Eternal Return. And you asked earlier, the Malibu, who pulls a lot from Derrida. Like you're going to have really a lot of fun reading the Parisia piece that I uploaded, because I think it goes over this exactly. And yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah. Okay.
I mean, she was a student of Derrida. Yes, August, I'm aware, but it's a fair point to add. She literally studied with him, and he adored her. I mean, she's brilliant.
So I should probably let us get back to the Klossowski.
I mean, fuck all that. Because it's an interesting conversation, because when we're talking about negation as a thing, in this text, the Eternal Return, if negation existed ontologically, if it is undecidable or even primary, like the Hegelian sense, the Eternal Return, as Nietzsche is describing or Klossowski's talking about, would basically become impossible. Because if something actually ceased, the cycle would be gone forever. The cycle has to be continually affirming.
So the way that I've been kind of working on this, and it's still very unpolished, but I've been thinking, like, if we think in terms of that there's a some structure exists, right? And that essentially functions as the ground, right? And then there's the transcendental experience of cognition of the world. Mm-hmm. And there are things that are true about the transcendental experience, such as indeterminacy, which are not necessarily true about the structure upon which it's formed. Does that make any sense?
Yes. There's a lovely essay. Well, it's a talk, but it got turned into an essay from a lovely guy named Gilles Deleuze called What is Grounding? Have you had a chance to read it?
No, I should read that, because it has to do with how he forms the virtual.
It's basically his way of saying, I just popped it into the chat here.
Thank you.
It's a series of seminars. The earlier Deleuze, so again, you'll see phrasing in there that you'll have to, it's a little clumsier than I think he says later, but the whole thing is really funny. The actual thing we have here written, the original like notes on it before Deleuze sort of got a hold of it, was Lefebvre actually was the one who took all the notes. Like, what a fucking, I'm always fascinated by how close all these people are and all this shit. But the whole point for Deleuze when it comes to like what is grounding and setting it up is it's identifying what you're talking about, but he's making a very different play when it comes to what foundationally is going on. It's really cool. I think you'll really like it.
That makes sense. So this hasn't come from actually reading Deleuze's like primary stuff. So I don't know how good these interpretations are, but I've read in a number of places of people saying that his notion of the virtual is limitless, and the way I figured is it's like a chaotic infinite phase space, right? Presumably it can produce every potential actual, but it will never repeat, and it goes through an eternal return, but it is an infinite return in this manner of speaking.
The eternal return is infinite.
So I suppose like there's the question of I need to find a better Maybe someone else has already like got a word for this. I assume that they do. I mean, I guess what's his name? Pierce has the dynamic object, but there's like there's the structure in the mind that people compose, or like the sign, and then there's the referent structures that they're trying to couple to in like an enactivist sense. And when I look at the eternal return, and perhaps it is because I'm not like hermeneutically coupling in the sense of like maybe I'm not understanding the eternal return itself particularly well, but I think it's referring to something in the world that I'm not entirely confident is infinite, but rather that it's the conception of it that is infinite. But this might be my like flaw.
I think that gets into a really fun discussion. I do. I think it's. I would love to be able to have it because it's. I would argue that it is very much intended to be. When Nietzsche says the eternal return, he's not being cute. He means it is eternally happening, and it is the shape of the cosmology of things, but also that you are the eternal return, and that's how you exist, and that's every moment. It's all eternal returns all the way down, fellas, kind of thing.
I think if you take like a Brahmanic perspective on it, and if one looks at it in like a mini worlds like Everettian sense as well, like there could be mini grounds. The Everettian one would just be one of them, right? So if we just assume that the material actually like whatever the nature of the material structure is, it produces the transcendental experience of living in the thing that Everett's describing as many worlds. Because like we have to do all of that sort of caveating to make it make sense that we're not like.
And the reason that these things are important when we talk about them, and it's an interesting to just touch in, and then we'll continue with this because I do want to finish these points today because I don't want to stop halfway through. But as we're going into it, the thing underneath it is how meaning is made is within this process of the eternal return, how signification is made. Traditionally, Klossowski writes about, and you can see this in Living Currency and a handful of his other specific notes, his work, in general, he writes about this stuff, but for sure in Living Currency, he gets more explicit that to him, it's impulses create images, phantasms of the world that we experience by recollecting and bringing in the sensory repeated data that are part of those intensities over time, and that to communicate we create simulacra of those images in order to communicate. And this process, how this comes about, he's literally outlining for us right now, that it does come from these elements of how these impulses and fluctuations of intensities are playing into each other, and how they're coming and combating each other and then coming out, because it's a very particular phrasing. When he says, one sec, I'm now going to dive in. Sorry, we're just going right to it. Great combo though. Thank you for the question. That's awesome. In turning back on itself, the intensity interprets itself. But how can it do this? By becoming a counterweight to itself. For this, the intensity must divide, separate from itself, and come back together. Very specifically, still, you'll notice there's no subject doing these things, right? There's no subject performing interpretation. This exists pre-subject. This is the unconscious intensities. Intensity itself is interpreting. This is why Nietzsche's sort of radical understanding of meaning and everything inspired an extraordinary explosion of thought. It signs all the way down, fellas. There's no signifying subject, none of that. But the counterweight, as it's coming about, this is again a physical mechanistic image inside of this process. Okay, this is not. I'm just going to go through this. It's not a dialectical opposition. This is not a Fichtean thesis antithesis. And this is not this. This is about getting to a dynamic equilibrium by becoming a counterweight to itself, a dynamic equilibrium through the differential forces at play. There is a relation created within weight counterweight that is the meaning. The relation is the meaning. Okay? The relation is the meaning. Now, this is what happens to the intensity of what can be called moments of rise and fall. However, it is always the same fluctuation, a wave, an onde. In the concrete sense, we might note in passing the importance of the spectacle of sea waves in Nietzsche's contemplation, which, by the way, Nietzsche wrote about sea waves a lot. And it's important. Onde, and again, ond, I don't give a fuck about any language. That's the way it works. I'm American. We don't care. But ond is a technical term. This is not metaphors or allegory, right? Intensities behaving like wave phenomena. They have amplitude. They have frequency. They have interference patterns of things. This was written pre-quantum understanding of anything, before any of that, way before any of that thing. But this is dissolving the idea of like the singular element and instead talking about things as waves. The ond. Onde? But I don't give a fuck. Ond. I think it's ond. But it's the rise and fall, the montée et descente. The eternal return operates through these oscillations. Because again, the wave, right? The counter wave, this is what is happening if it creates the wave, the two intensities, the counterweight and the weight. And then you have this sort of odd up and down because it's a wave. It's a flux, a fluctuation. Ond. Thank you, Estelle. You could just tell I was screaming at you. I know. But it's the ups and downs. When he says ups and downs, he doesn't mean a single dot going up and down. The wave. Have you ever seen an oscilloscope? Have you ever seen an oscilloscope? Or a wave of the ocean? It goes up and down. But it's also not a single thing. It's the waves up and down, rising and falling, intensive oscillations, not a spatial path of a singular point. It is rhythmic pulsing, not a mechanical rotation of a singular object, right? It's really important that you get why I'm yelling about this, because as we keep going, you'll see. But does an interpretation presuppose the search for a signification? Rise and fall. These are designations, nothing else. Is there any signification beyond this observation of a rise and fall? This is a demonstrative reference, right? The rise and fall are designations, indices, not significations. It's not a conceptual content with a universal meaning. Intensities are indicators, designators. They do not transcend to actually signify. Ever. It's not how it works. It's not what they do. And nothing else. And nothing else. And Klossowski does not write and nothing else because there's something else. That's it. Is there any signification beyond this observation of a rise and fall? Is there? Beyond this? No. That's it. The rise and fall is the content. It's everything. There's no symbolic surplus. There's no dreamy symbolic staged thought. This is a machinic intensity for the unconscious. Right? Yeah? Intensity never has any meaning other than that of being an intensity. In itself, the intensity seems to have no meaning. I shouldn't have to explain this sentence. I don't think I need to explain that sentence. That's it. The intensity, so don't do that. Hey Freud, hey Lacan, hey Zizek. No, stop that. No, don't do that. What is a meaning? How can it be constituted? What is the agent of meaning? Full, that's 5. The agent of meaning, and thus of signification, once again seems to be the intensity, depending on various fluctuations. If intensity by itself has no meaning, other than that of being an intensity, how can it be the agent of signification or be signified as this or that, a high or low tonality of the soul? intensity produces meaning, but has no meaning. I really like how he phrases it. I think that's fucking great. That's what he literally, I'm not even explaining a thing. I'm just saying his words. It produces meaning, but has no meaning. It's ground that has no ground, right? We were just talking about grounding. It's ground that has no ground. It is differential in and of itself. Its meaning comes not from a positive term that has this symbolic connection, but instead variations in relationships, relations between fluctuations, as the fluctuations move in and out and they relate, and the multitude of them, the relationship between them is where we find meaning. It's not an intrinsic property of any point. It's not how it works. And they say, what is the agent of meaning? Well, we asked above how it could interpret itself. We answered that in its risings and fallings, it had to act as a counterweight. But this is nothing more than simple observation. How does it acquire a meaning? How is meaning constituted in the intensity? Well, it's precisely by turning back on itself, even in a new fluctuation. By turning back on itself, by repeating, and as it were imitating itself, it becomes a sign. The repetition of this process is the creation of meaning. A single fluctuation has no meaning, and it can't make meaning. It won't make meaning. A single fluctuation is a mustard burp. It's a fart. No one gives a fuck. Off it goes. It's not even a fart. It's less than a fart. No one gives a fuck. But if you have a second fluctuation that's similar, it kind of refers to the first, it designates, well, that's a sign. That's something. Meaning emerges here through this difference of things, the temporal spacing, the relational differences of things. This sunyata, dude, this gets crazy across all of that. Yes. I find this to be a really beautiful way of putting all of it. But he said meaning comes through this difference. This is the semiotic genesis that is being attributed to Nietzsche here. As it were, imitating itself. When I just talked a moment ago about Klossowski and his semiotics that he's talked about, simulacrum is a copy, an imitation. This is a simulacrum. It's not a copy of an original. No. But self-repeating difference that produces a semblance of identity. Basically, this is just like if you've ever read Klossowski's work on simulacra, that's just right here. Like this is Klossowski at his best. It's so well done. So with that, you end up in this really weird place where instead of talking about signs in the unconscious, no, its signs are the evental collisions of these things. It's not static representations, but dynamic processes repeating and in relation to each other repeating. This sign happens in a folding back of intensity onto a prior state. Right?
Quick question.
Please. We're getting close to finishing his entire semiotics.
Does these signs invade impulses, or kind of like, and what's the relation between these signs and impulses? Like, what the relation?
So the impulses in time produce them, and then we have the signs, and then the signs are communicated as simulacra. How the signs then fall back on or come back into that process? Yes, we will be talking about that soon.
Yeah.
It's not exactly like Anti-Oedipus here, but if you've already read a little bit or been on our readings, it's not really far from that. Because again, in time, it's part of this is remembering that these are in time, the relation in time. It is not that you have identical fluctuations in the same moment. That's not what he's talking about here. He's talking about in time, that you have these relations between all of these fluctuations, and that happens a second time, a third time, a fourth time, a billionth time. And over time, they become related to each other. And as they're related to each other, that sign is created. And these signs exist then in time. But now when we're way down the road and we're mostly experiencing signs, and there's a subject that understands itself to exist, well, then how do these things come back? Because that's the next little bit. He says, but a sign is first of all the trace of a fluctuation, a flux of intensity. The trace is not used accidentally here, just to mention Reed. That's not an accident here. Like, this is very much used in that. And that's actually the answer to the discussion that was going a few minutes ago. I know, but we're trying. I got to go in time. He's referring to, Klossowski's referring to a lot of shit here, but this is this sort of mark left by the departed intensity. A sign is not only a trace of a fluctuation. Trace is used here. It is not only this ideal meaning. It is an inscription. It's physical. This is not Frege. This is not any of these other. This is Nietzsche's genealogy, the mnemonics of pain. This is the way signs are carved into flesh and memory through suffering. Sign is first of all the trace of a fluctuation of intensity. It can also mark an absence of intensity.
So what exactly does he mean by absence there?
It's as I was describing. It marks the absence. It is there still produces a negative image of a thing. There's still stuff missing in this affirmative. It's fine, but again, it is the trace of the fluctuation. It also marks an absence of intensity. But in that absence of intensity, a new afflux is necessary, if only to signify absence. Absence can't exist unless it has been affirmatively signified as absence.
That makes sense, but then my question would be, if you've got a bunch of present intensities, right? Mm-hmm. Is there a latent shape to?
There's not a lot of present intensities. There are intensities that are consistent, and then relations between them that over time leave traces. The traces and the signs of them, that ultimately the signs are the traces of the fluctuation. They may mark an absence of fluctuation here or there, but the absence of that fluctuation isn't actually the generative thing. The new afflux is necessary to generate that. Even in nihilism, even in Nietzsche's nihilism, it requires an intensive investment. Nothingness is not given. Nothingness is created. This is why you said, I thought you were saying sunyata. This is the idea of nothingness not given but achieved. We create nothing.
That makes sense, I suppose. So with the absence, he's more talking about like pointers specifically, in a manner of speaking. I suppose the question is, like, if you have pointers that point towards an absence, right, and then that absence is then like latently actualized later, and
there isn't an absence in that sense, though. So this is presuming that absence exists first, or that it happens to notice it, and now I've seen absence. No. Mm-hmm. Absence of a thing still has to be affirmatively constituted. Presence is constitutive of everything. They're asymmetrically related. It's not that we signify a void that was already there. To signify the void demands presence in the first place. So it's not so much a presence or absence binary we're talking about here. Presence is everything. The negative is created.
There's essentially the fact that some solutions to certain problems work and some don't, and that there is also a meaningful way in which one can get better at solving problems raises the question of whether or not there is like a latent field of potential that we are able to align with or resonate with. And this is kind of why I think like there's a problem with the notion of conflating causality, structure, and time in terms of like precedence, but that there definitely is there is real capability to make predictions and identify pre-existing resonances. Not all of them, but some of them.
Well, so let's take just a wave, like a sine wave, nothing exciting, just a bullshit thing, right? I would say that there is no, if that is it, there's nothing that is missing. There's no absence there. You could say, and one might argue at the end of a long chain of semiotic understandings of things, that as the wave goes down and goes low, it's actually an absence of intensity. But I would argue that that's not an absence of intensity. That is an intensity. And what we're doing is we're naturally comparing that with another intensity. And as such, the relation that is created between them that generates a knowing of an absence is an affirming process entirely, that there is never actually an absence itself.
That makes sense. I do agree with that. It's the thing with the sine wave that I think is weird here is that if I double that sine wave's frequency and I overlay it,
yes,
there exists a resonance that's created that doesn't happen with every sine wave. And so then there's the question of, does the structure of possible resonances pre-exist before I go putting that sine wave in?
How could it?
So I assume you would agree that there are some sine waves which would be resonant with that sine wave, and there are some which won't, right?
Yes.
And is that a completely undetermined field, or is there a determined field there?
It's entirely contingent, as far as I'm concerned. Like again, and this would be maybe its own sort of incredible discussion. But if we're going down that road, my question would be how we talk about it as determined. Because, like, for example, a perfect negative of any wave is going to cancel out wave. Happy day. Like, really boring version of this. But that isn't a thing that necessarily like has to be the case, because there is a huge amount of contingency in what exactly duplicating that wave is and negating that wave means in a whole bunch of different sort of things. There's a reason that we spend a huge amount of time solidifying that measurement, separating it, putting it into a tiny little box, and being very aware of what that means. But as we're doing so, we're necessarily separating it from a huge amount of contingent sort of secondary things to make a perfect space for a perfectly measured sine wave to be perfectly blocked out by a perfectly created wave in its opposition, which means we've done a huge amount of conceptual work to build out a negative. And in the space of as things go, sure, there will be waves that cancel each other out and all those things. But to be able to recognize as such or have that sign exist that says as such, it is way down the road in conceptualization in such a way that there's no way to talk about absence without creating it from creation and a total positive existence itself.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess I should probably read the grounding thing to see if it kind of tackles what I'm talking about. Because like the transcendentally, I agree that it is not necessary for that to cancel it out, and that the cognitive awareness of that relationship is a thing that is created generatively, certainly. But as for the material structure, if it does have, if it exhibits behavior that we will receive as determinate, right, then this implies strongly that there are regions of transcendental or virtual space, in a manner of speaking. It's kind of a misuse of the terms, but you could sort of like think of it as like if you like integrate virtual regions, in a manner of speaking. There will be some of them that will produce the behavior that we're looking for, that will solve a problem that we pre-compose, and then there will be others that won't. And this sort of defines what viability is and explains why there can be convergent, like, what is it called? Carcinization, the thing where crabs happen multiple times. You know, it's like, it's definitely contingent, but it's not like it's doing like horizontal gene transfer or something like that. It's actually converging as if pulled by some kind of force.
Right, but I'm trying to stay with simpler examples because I don't want to get too deep into places that I'm going to be less familiar with and maybe misstate. But like if we're talking about like the two waves, and those in the world, there's a place where it happens to be an earthquake in one side of the world and the other, and waves in the ocean literally are doing like, and we're not measuring like. But what happens is these waves may cancel each other out, but it's actually not a creation of absence. Like, it's actually still, the conservation of energy is still happening. Things aren't vanished, they're redistributed. The waves work differently in that sense. There's an entire, like, way, I do a lot of modular synth bullshit, and it's always fascinating when you have these, like, weird zero amplitude things after you have these waves that are supposedly, working against each other. But then all of that shit comes out in another different way because you attach it to somewhere else, and it fucks with the energy redistribution yet again. Zero, or the absence of a thing at that cancellation point, is about measurement, and measurement is way down that line in terms of signification. It doesn't have that thing where we're talking about, hey, as these waves are going, as intensities work, there isn't a natural or existent absence or negation at any of this point, except for that is affirmatively created.
Absolutely. I definitely agree in like the sunyata sense. My question then would be, if that's the case, then where the heck are we getting the relationship between the transcendental, the cognitive, and the material ground? Or basically, there seems to be like a transcendental surface that things fold back on themselves, and some things kind of just don't. They diffuse, right?
Right.
And
it's like, almost as if there is an almost existent, but not really existent, almost surface on which these recordings in time, the relations of these recordings of intensities in time are etched. Like I was using the example Nietzsche talks about it, like literally as recording in flesh, as memory. But over time, the intensity of these things, it's not once. A pinprick one time is not a memory to people. But if you get a tattoo or you get scarified, it is absolutely a thing you don't fucking forget because it exists in time and it writes on itself. So there's almost this way that you would have a surface of recording that it keeps just the relations that are collected and the signs produced in these relations of, positive, negative, or whatever it may be, that as over time, some are stronger than others and then they fade when they stop being repeated. Almost as if you had a body without productive organs. Like literally it's BWO. The answer is the BWO. The answer is the BWO. The answer is the BWO. This surface of recording that somehow in time is this space of consistency. The way that Klossowski here has been talking about in the eternal return, we have this weird way of the eternal return of the same, but it's not identical, not in the sense of like we measure everything and it's exact, but somehow we know it's happened again, it will happen again. And actually most of our lives, it is this thing we are aware that this moment we're aware in now will come to a fucking end. And there will be another Brooks soon enough that will take over. And this Brooks will die. The one talking right now is going to die. The one explaining Klossowski is going to die. And then the next one is going to be Brooks wandering off to have some more tea because he's tired. And then it's going to be Dad Brooks who takes over. Like there's this consistent thing, but somehow there is a maintenance, a consistency carried between them. It's not identical, but it's a repetition in this process, a repetition that creates that same, that creates that experience. And so we are the actual circle. We are the eternal return. We don't experience it. We are it.
Yeah, that makes sense. But how then do you make sense of like locality? Not in, so there's,
the locality would be captured in the same way that we're talking about, like the subject. Brooks Klossowski Brooks right now. The last Klossowski Brooks died. Here's another Klossowski Brooks explaining this one because I had to disappear in my brain, come back out. This thing I'm doing now, this consistency again, I'm experiencing it, but I don't remember who I was or exactly what we were talking about a moment ago. You probably don't either. We're trying to work forward in time, but we have some little notes and things that are carried over. So this repeating is the thing that keeps that consistency. And in the case of the subject or the case of the writing surface or whatever it may be, it isn't the same, but because we are the circle, we're not Brooks. I'm not Brooks. I'm the circle of the repetition, and I'm experiencing almost myself through myself. That thing that's happening enables that return by its own necessity, because it's a consistent return of all of the intensities of my own experience, falling on itself, dividing itself, counterweighting itself, and then deciding on the signs that make that, and then having that produced, and then doing it again and again and again, over and over and over. Infinitesimally forever.
I feel like there's a way to. I'll have to think about it more. I'm sure there's a way I can phrase it that, because like I feel like there's something missing still, in the sense that like I feel like this is fundamentally connected to the hard problem in a way. Actually, that there's there are problems of conflation between like experience and the cognition itself, right? The flow of information through time and through space and through various mediums, right? And the thing that the ego is recognizing that it is, and the blendedness with the consciousness that it expresses to other things, these are all still real flows of information. They're just different ones.
Yes, right? I'm now just going to start reading.
Fair. Yeah.
Read along. Thus, in each person, apparently as their own possession, there moves in, this is the next page. I'm skipping ahead, I don't care. There moves an intensity, its flux and reflux counterweight, right? Forming significant or insignificant fluctuations of a thought that in fact belongs to no one, with neither beginning nor end. But if, contrary to this undulating element, each of us forms a closed and apparently delimited whole, it is by virtue of these traces of signifying fluctuations, that is to say, a system of signs that I will here call the code of everyday signs, as to where our own fluctuations start or stop, so that the signs can permit us to signify, to speak to ourselves and others. We know nothing, except that there is one sign in this code that always corresponds to either the highest or lowest degree of intensity, namely the self, the I, the subject of all our propositions. It is thanks to this sign, which nonetheless is nothing but an always variable trace of fluctuation, that we constitute ourselves as thinking, that a thought as such occurs to us, even though we are never quite sure if it is not others who are thinking and continue to think in us. But what is this other that forms the outside in relation to this inside we believe ourselves to be? Everything is led back to a single discourse, namely, fluctuations of intensity that correspond to the thought of everyone and no one. The sign of the self in the code of everyday communication, insofar as it corresponds to the strongest or weakest intensity, and establishes a correspondence between our own degrees of presence or absence and the degrees of presence and absence of the outside, thus assures a variable state of coherence, both within ourselves and within our surroundings. The thought of no one, this intensity in itself without any determinable beginning or end, finds a necessity in the agent support that appropriates it for itself, and is assigned a destiny within the vicissitudes of memory and the forgetting of itself or the world. Nothing could be more arbitrary once we admit that everything is on a single circuit of intensity. For a designation to be produced, for a meaning to be constituted, my will must intervene. But again, this is nothing more than this appropriated intensity. Now in a Stimmung, a tonality that I will designate as the highest feeling, that I will aspire to maintain as the highest thought, what has happened? Have I not surpassed my own limits and thereby depreciated the everyday code of signs, either because thought abandons me or else because I can no longer discern the difference between fluctuations from without and those from within? Up to now, in the everyday context, thought was always referred back to me in the designation myself. But what becomes of my own coherence at that degree of intensity where thought ceases to refer back to me in the designation myself, and instead invents a sign by which it would designate its own coherence with itself? If this sign is no longer my own thought, does it not signify my exclusion from all possible coherence? If it is still mine, how could it conceivably designate an absence of intensity at the highest degree of intensity? Let us now suppose that, I'm just going to keep reading, I don't give a shit. During such a high tonality of the soul, an image of the circle is formed. Something happens to my own thought in this sign. It regards itself as dead, as no longer my own. My thought enters into such a strict coherence with it that the invention of this sign, of the circle, takes on the power of all thought. Does this mean that the thinking subject would lose its own identity in a coherent thought that would itself exclude identity? There's nothing here to distinguish the designating intensity from the designated intensity, to reestablish the coherence between the self and the world as constituted by everyday designations. A single circuit brings me back to the code of everyday signs, and then makes me depart, again leaving me at the mercy of the sign as soon as I try to explain to myself the event it represents. For if, in this ineffable moment, I hear myself say, "You are returning to this moment, you have already returned to it, you will return to it innumerable times," no matter how coherent this proposition may seem to be in terms of the sign of the circle from which it is derived, for it is itself this very proposition, as an actual self in the context of everyday signs, I myself fall into incoherence. And this is a double manner, in relation to the coherence of this thought itself and in relation to the code of everyday signs. According to the latter, I can only will myself once and for all, and it is on this basis that all my designations and their communicable meaning are constituted. But to re-will myself one more time indicates that nothing ever succeeds in getting constituted in a single meaning, once and for all. The circle opens me to inanity, encloses me in the following alternative. Either everything returns because nothing has ever had any meaning whatsoever, or else nothing has ever had a meaning except through the return of all things, without beginning or end. And here is a sign in which I myself am nothing, a sign to which I always return for nothing. What is my part in this circular movement in relation to which I am incoherent, or in relation to this thought that is so perfectly coherent that it excludes me at the very moment I think it? What is the sign of the circle that empties every designation of its content for the sake of this sign? The high tonality of the soul becomes the highest thought only by restoring the intensity to itself, by integrating the chaos from which it emanates with the sign of the circle which it has formed. I really like this fucking book. If you can't tell, I get a little lost in it. It just felt like that was kind of what you were talking about, Reed.
Yeah, there's a lot of it in there. Yeah, I also like that he uses the word coherence, which I use a ton. So yeah, makes sense.
It's really good, and it's the in here cohere setup is a thing in French that works really, really well, and that Smith carries through in Deleuze and Klossowski. Lapujade does too. Inherence, how meaning inheres or effuses. Like there's a whole bunch of phrasings that they use, but it's fantastic. I'm completely with you. But it just felt like that was kind of what we're talking about. This is intensity is subject to a moving chaos without beginning or end. And that is, again, the phrasing and how this works and how it sets up is so fucking good. But with that, we're about to hit almost 3 hours, and I do have to actually bounce out because my brain I will just not stop reading this fucking book. Like I literally could probably, I would just be hoarse. Like you'd tune out, go to sleep, wake up tomorrow, and I'd be like, but if God, I wouldn't be able to stop. It's very good.
Hey, Brock.
Every fucking thing he does is just so great. Oh, Afnan, how you doing, my friend?
Hi, I'm doing great. How are you?
I am really good. I really like this book.
I had many comments about your conversation, but I'll let it go. I just wanted to ask you. Last time I requested from you the French version of the one that we found from it. The word about returning to the same thing and returning of the same thing.
Yes.
The French version of Deleuze. Yeah. The exact one that you had, the one that we found in it. Yeah, please. Thank you.
Yes. I actually have that. I forgot. I apologize. I got that's what happens. Like if I go 3 hours, the rest of my day, my brain is like, in about 20 minutes, my brain will go, oh, I guess you don't need me anymore. It's like out. That's not a joke.
The problem is I forgot also where to find it, so now I have to go through syncing things together again. But I'll do it my
own. We have it saved a little bit. It's in the stream as well. We actually did find it in the stream. So if you go back, let me see if I can. I'll post the link in the chat too. Because this was
that I was planning to do. Yes.
You're talking about Tuesday, right?
I don't remember.
It's like 2 days ago. It wasn't 2 weeks ago.
No, 2 days ago. It was 2 weeks ago.
It was the 2 weeks ago one.
Yeah.
Man.
But yeah, I've been meaning to send that to Eldoran for the logic of sense.
Yeah, this is. I mean, for the whole difference of repetition shit, fucking Eldoran. This is entire jam, motherfucker. Fuck you, Eldoran. Get over
motherfucker.
Quit being a student, learning and studying and working with people in real life. Dedicate your life to wasting it online like the rest of us. Come on.
And by the way, I really like the final answer about the like when you said there isn't a void. Yeah, that's exactly the point. That's where I was gonna talk. Even in Derrida's absence has nothing to do with this. It's not a negative absence. Derrida's absence is exactly the rhizomic. It's exactly the causality in a horizontal aspect of the rhizome. It's not the negative absence of a void in that sense, because even in the, I think it will be translated to English to margin of philosophy. Yeah. In margin of philosophy, he would actually, when he talks about the voice and how it reacts to how we hear sounds and how sound is produced through waves, that's exactly what he's talking about, where the absence is absence of coherence of the full rhizomic horizontal relations, where everything is an infinite, everything is a complete positive infinite. And you gave the perfect example of one thing of it, which is, yes, Brooks dies, but it doesn't mean there is nothing. The question of why is there something or nothing is a wrong question to them, or at least to Nietzsche. In this perspective, it's actually a question of why is there a thing instead of another thing?
Yes.
Why is this there instead of another thing? So yeah.
Well, and it's really fascinating because it's, again, the Eastern/Western tradition of this is when you start getting into like how the origin of zero came about, or what no thing means in Eastern or Buddhist or Hindu or Zen thought, Taoist traditions, like what no thing means. It doesn't mean zero or total absence. It means no thing, which is a thing. And so it's a really weird, like, again, it's why I kind of chuckled, and why I made the comment a few times when we're talking about sunyata, because it is so spot on, that odd thing that in the West we very much tend to have it's good and evil. It's something and therefore a total absence of something, with like the binary thing that's built into so much of what we do.
Yes, yes, exactly. That's a perfect example of it, which is also like Heidegger discusses this point exactly. That's why I mentioned Husserl's, because Husserl has the example of the house when he speaks of the house, that when you see a house, actually you're not actually looking to the full house. You only see a wall, and nonetheless you understand the full house or something out of it. And that was the point of talking of the third object, or the third thing, the thing that exists in. Anyway, so exactly when you speak of the Zen, Heidegger mentions this in the Japanese, where, for example, it's the like the there is no such thing as someone took a sword and killed another person. No, actually, so the example is really amazing, because actually what happened is the sword killed the person. There is no someone who killed a person using a sword. The sword is the one who did the killing.
Well, it goes back to my favorite logic of sense line, which is where Deleuze talks about the way that we would say that a surgeon is slicing the skin of a patient with a scalpel, when we just as easily could say a patient is dulling the surgeon's blade with his skin. It's all about what we privilege and how we set up in these conversations, and we don't really understand that as we do.
The police disagree, speaking from experience.
The question then would be, so to take a descriptive approach to that, the question is then like, why do we say the person killed them rather than the sword killed them, right? If both are technically signified valid interpretations of the material, right?
Responsibility. Because of agentic responsibility and good and evil. Because you don't blame and again, this is why you see Republicans, or my favorite, you see the New York Times when they talk about Gaza. You see this in headlines, because when I would say, wow, Israel bombed a hospital, instead they will say, hospital exploded by bomb. And they literally do this because that's how you build everything. Again, if we're talking about it from this intensive affirming thing, they're building their entire understanding and meaning structure off of their effective experiential thing that generates their knowledge, generates the meaning and the words. And as such, I privilege Israel doing it because that's how I understand. But for them, they can't possibly put the evil or the destructive element or responsibility on a thing they believe that require their worldview requires it to be a certain way. So it's set up in very particular setup.
Yeah, I think the preconscious investment lens is really strong for it. And then for me, the question then would be like, can we do metaphysics with that and go back and identify similarities between how multiple different cultures produce the way in which they represent things, based off of like the study of viability, basically, like memetics and genetics, not from the naive stance that there's a singular fittest point, but rather a genuine understanding of how pressures of viability create a plurality that isn't just diffuse, but still consolidates around certain niches.
I am going to give you a handful of books right now.
Thank you.
More books to read. It's just to mention, it's Grial and Godelier would be the two I'd recommend top tier. Braudel, I think, does an excellent job, but it's much more Western focused. Godelier has Enigma of the Gift and Mental and Material, which is about thought economy from a Marxist sociological anthropomorphic perspective. It's amazing. Grial is extremely unique. If you can find PDFs of his, just get it. He has one of the most extraordinary, the Men of Fire. It's one of my favorite texts exactly on what you're talking about. What fire means to primitive. It's very different. It's very different. But as much as I love doing this, I am going to say this would be Dude, the French book. What did I say? What did I do? Did I post the French version?
The book that I asked you for 1,000 times now.
Oh, yes.
Deleuze.
Goddamn difference. I am so fucking sorry.
That's okay.
Here is différence et répétition. That's it, right?
Thank you. That's it for me. Thank you very much.
All right, good. Sorry, I can't believe I kept space. Every time you say it too. Trust me, I'm listening. My brain is doing its own story. I'm done. This is it. My brain's we're ending my time. It has been lovely. You people on YouTube, I'm going to send you to someone who you should tell them to fuck off. That's perfectly great. Everyone here on Discord, love you all. If you aren't on Discord, you should join us, discord.gg/DGQC. You can get all kinds of PDFs and happy interruptions and odd divergence and rabbit holes that we love going down. And if you want to support what I do, head over to patreon.com/DGQC and say hi, drop a cup of coffee a month. Always good, always happy, and I'll see you all soon enough.
See you around.
Enjoy.
Everybody have a great rest of the day. Bye.
Yeah.
See you, Brooks.
Enjoy.
And thank you, by the way. I really appreciate the I've been like,
oh no, that's studying. Like, this is the fun part.